Hello and welcome to today's conversations with Dr. Westman. Today we're going to be chatting about your personal carb tolerance. How are you doing, Eric?
Great. How are you, Glenn?
Very, very good. Thank you. So, Eric, I know that recently your new book, End Your Carb Confusion, recently launched. And discussing that book, and the premise of that book is about finding your personal carb threshold. And as we know, everyone is different. And while some might have to restrict carbs to 20 grams or less total carbs per day, some can actually tolerate a higher carb amount, up to 150 grams of total carbs per day.
That's right. And so the new book is a way to understand what your carbohydrate tolerance might be. Now, it's not really possible for me to predict for sure, like certainly 100%, but we can give you a good idea of how many carbs you probably can eat and still be very healthy. I mean, how many people, there are, probably a billion people who eat carbs and they're healthy, probably even more than a billion. And so, End Your Carb Confusion is a way to not all or nothing, oh, carbs are bad, can't have any. It's understanding what carbs do to our bodies, the sugars and the starches, and then mitigating or reducing the harmful effects or metabolic effects that you don't want from eating them. So it's important that we don't just throw all carbs out and ignore a lot of science that's been done. And the reality, I'm sure you've seen people who eat more carbs and they are apparently healthy and their blood looks great. They live long lives. I mean, so it's more nuanced than just don't ever eat carbs again. And I mean, then there are a lot of people who would never give up all of their carbs. And so to understand among the carbs, if you choose to eat them, what are the healthiest ones to have? And, spoiler alert, turns out refined sugar and refined starch are the bad guys. So you want to, those are the harmful things metabolically. But it's really been exciting to put together a book like this where we can put together the knowledge that we've learned from all sorts of diets. So it's not just a keto book or a low fat or low carb or low glycemic or Atkins or South Beach or all these different names. It really cuts to the chase of just the food, not the names, the branding, that sort of thing.
Now, it's important to know that while we talk about three different phases within the book, all of them still fall within the parameters of a low carb diet. So it's not that you advocate 300 or 400 grams of carbs a day. No, we talk about three different phases. So, for example, phase one is from 0 to 20 grams. That's your true tried and tested method of reversing metabolic related illnesses like type 2 diabetes and hypertension and metabolic syndrome and GERD and acid reflux and all those kind of things. While phase two is between 20 and 50 grams of total carbs. And then we've got phase three, which is between 50 and 150 grams of total carbs.
That's right. And it's interesting that most of the book authors and the science that's been done has kind of come up with these three rough categories. Of course, everyone's going to be a little different and you can find your own personal level. But the reason we all are kind of finding the same thing, these different categories, is that the metabolic differences people have are kind of fall into three categories. And of course, the lifestyle that you lead is a big factor too. If you're healthy and running or cycling or you're swimming, you're being very active, you're going to be able to eat more carbs and not have the bad metabolic effects from it. And the other spectrum, if you're more sedentary, you're expecting the diet to do everything for you metabolically and lifestyle wise, then you're going to want to be lower on the carb levels. But you're right. And when you look at all diets, you still would be considered on the low carbohydrate definitions that you'll see in the literature. But That old low fat, high carb thing is kind of dying a political death. You don't hear about it much. No one's going to say that it was wrong, but there aren't a whole lot of people in the mainstream who are pushing a low fat diet anymore, because the studies finally were done, and then they found that it really didn't do much. It can work for some people, but I prefer the low carb approach because it works with our metabolism, the sugar, the insulin. That is what drives obesity and diabetes and heart disease.
Now, I find that there's something very, very helpful in the book, and that is a table that helps guide folks how to assess their personal carb tolerance. So do you want to talk about that table that you've got inside the book there that helps folks to assess and find their personal carb tolerance threshold?
Yeah. So as Amy Berger and I were, my co-author, we're trying to it's like translating the information, the scientific information. We didn't want you to have to go out and get a blood test, for example, to figure out what to eat. We didn't want you to have advanced testing and all these scans, and you'll see doctors talking about that and requiring you to go do those things. So what we found is the language, the clinical syndromes or symptoms, things you might be feeling, to figure out what your carb intake should be. And it comes down to things. The obvious ones are you overweight or heavy? Are you a good storer of the extra energy you eat? That's going to be putting you on the lower end of the carbs. If you come to this trying to lose weight, you have 50, 100 pounds to lose, then you're going to want to be on the lower end. If you're healthy weight, where you want to be, always have been, then you're going to be at the higher end of the carbs. And it's in a table so that we don't make you read a whole lot, get extra. You just check, and at the bottom where you have the most checks basically will put you into that category as a place to start. So if you come to this otherwise healthy, you're exercising, you're young, you may end up in the higher carb 100 grams per day, of course, of the healthiest carbs you can eat from the get-go. So not everyone has to do a very low carb or keto diet, in our opinion. And this is really what the science says. And the table will help you figure out in layman's terms or in medical conditions or issues, not in terms of blood tests. And you don't have to get a glucose tolerance test and an insulin or a Kraft test or all these other things that you'll hear people talk about. That's not something we wanted to have people have to do. So we put it into language that you can just, oh, I don't have that, or I do, and then you figure out what category you'll be in.
Now, let's say somebody has embarked on this kind of lifestyle. They've gone on your true tried and tested 20 grams total carbs method, and they've reversed their medical conditions, and they've achieved their fat loss goals, and they really are everything that they need to be, and they've achieved everything. How would one go from, let's say, phase 1, which is 20 grams of carbs, to including a little bit more carbs in their diet? So for example, phase 2 is 20 to 50. It doesn't mean, though, that everybody should then go from 20 and then jump straight onto 50. So how would one practically implement the transition from phase 1 to phase 2?
Right. So a general way to think about it is change things slowly and not to leap from category to category. And slowly, to me, and the other doctors that have been using this method for a while, slowly means 5 carbs per day for a few weeks. So you would increase, if you're not sure what 5 carbs are, and you'll learn pretty quickly, but that would mean, 1 slice of low carb bread, or a few strawberries, or, half a banana or less. So we're talking about baby steps and changes in increasing the carbs. And, I'm finding that is a need among my patients and among people who are doing keto now. They're getting to their goal, and then they're asking, well, what do I do now? But the book also leaves it open that if you feel well and all the parameters that have to do with health look good, it's okay to do keto forever. I mean, that's kind of the new science that's been generated over the last 20 years, but you don't have to necessarily do a 20 gram or less total, not net forever. And so adding back slowly is, generally it's 5 grams per day and it's not like here you do it for X days, see how you do, for a week or two, and then you add back 5 more and then 5 more. So it's slowly changing things. And, in the big picture view, there are a lot of people who come to me and they do kind of the extreme, go from one to the other. And then, but if you go back to the way you were eating at the beginning, you're just going to end up where you were eventually. So most people who do this will understand how carbs affect them, and that you can't just go from 20 to 100 without taking some time to see how your body responds as you adjust.
Now, something that's also important, and we spoke about the 3 different phases. Let's talk about phase 3, for example, which is 50 to 150. That's, while it's still considered a low carb diet, it's still quite a lot of 150 grams of carbs, a lot of carbs. But I know that you didn't want to leave anybody out. So when you look at the entire world population and you look at the amounts of sugars and carbs that we have slowly been increasing, decade after decade, year after year, 150, while it's still, in terms of the low carb world, seems like a lot, it's really a hell of a lot less than a lot of people are consuming on a daily basis. And why? What was it that prompted you to include this category into the phases, and not leave anybody out?
Yeah, well, several things that fairly obvious. The science is there. There's a lot of science about diets that have up to 150 grams of carbs, and they can be helpful for even obesity and diabetes and prevention of those things. So to be inclusive of all of the science, we wanted to increase the amount, and then to be inclusive of all the different types of metabolic differences that people have. I mean, I had to try to come to grips with the obvious, in my own sphere of family. I have a brother who can eat lots of fruit, but he's naturally active, goes out, plays tennis all the time, and was a basketball player when he was young. And so there are obvious things where you will see other people, well, how can they do that? How can they have that and they're healthy? And so it explains the metabolic differences that we have, to open up what we've learned about sugar and its effect on our metabolism, to make that available to everyone. Everyone will suffer from the consequences of sugar if they have too much of it, but your metabolic differences will tell you how much is too much. So for you, it may be more than for me.
Well, I think that the defining difference between this book and the other keto books out there is that this book includes absolutely everybody. So depending on where you are on your journey, and everyone's got a different journey that they're on, there's a phase for you to live your best life that you possibly can. So I'd like to thank you as well for bringing out an important book like this. Thanks to you and Amy. If you guys would like to purchase a copy of the book, you can find it at Amazon or one of the major bookstores in the United States. The book's name is called End Your Carb Confusion. We'll also put a link in the description. Something else that if you would like to learn also about our Adapt Your Life Academy, recently during COVID, we couldn't do our in-person events anymore, so we launched our Adapt Your Life Academy, where we do online courses, and we've had tremendous success with these courses. You can find us at adaptyourlifeacademy.com. If you enjoyed this video, would like to see future videos, you can find us on our YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts under the name of Adapt Your Life. And on behalf of Eric and myself, thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. Eric, thank you for your time as usual, and we look forward to catching up again next week with another Conversations of with Dr. Westman.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
If you like this video, you're going to love our Adapt Your Life Academy, so click on the link in the description to find out more.